people change the game and what will happen. We believe it'll be massive. Tom, your reaction to this new change?
Well, I think you hit on a lot of it. I think I come at it from a different perspective, right? I spent 30 years in infrastructure, systems, and software. So when you're coming at it from that side of it, you see this mobile world exploding and the Internet of Things starting to take off and changes in terms of how the connectivity at the edge works and this massive evolution. You can think about it in one of two ways. On one level, you can be terrified, because it's all going away. All the stuff we built is going away. And on the other hand, it creates a tremendous number of new opportunities. And I think we're only really just starting to see the creativity come out of the enterprise side in terms of not adapting to this change in mobile, but actually starting to invent things that will enable it and make Internet of Things possible. And new approaches to how silicon should be developed for those applications, new applications altogether. I spent a lot of time recently looking at a number of different storage companies, and something fundamentally needs to change there in order for that technology to adapt. And guess what? It's now starting to really come forward. And so, yeah, I think that what we're starting to see is the big engines, the big historical engines of innovation starting to catch up to this big trend, and it's only just, the very beginning.
We have Tom Joyce, who's an industry executive in the infrastructure area, worked at EMC back in the early days, and then HPE and a variety of other companies. Tom, you're an expert in infrastructure, and this is what's interesting to me as a technical person. You have the glam and the flair of mobile, the devices and the awesome screen capabilities, the size of the devices, the role of the tablet that's now changing, where it's going to become an entertainment device in home and a companion to mobile. That's what people see. They see the virtual reality, they see the augmented reality, the coolness of some of this awesome software that needs all that 5G bandwidth. But there's an under the hood kind of engine on the infrastructure side that's going through a transformation. It's called network transformation, because you have networks that move the data around. You have the compute power, the cloud that computes on things, the data and the storage that stores it all. It's getting better on the device side, the handset, but also there's stuff going on in the cloud. So I got to get your take. Why is now the time for the key network transformation? What are the key things happening now that really make this concept of network transformation so compelling?
Well, I'll take it from kind of a non-technical perspective, looking at it from an infrastructure guy standpoint, right? What we've been looking at is in the transformation of the compute platform from inside your data center to the cloud, all the things that we've known kind of changing and going away. But the parts the cloud hasn't really touched yet or really transformed yet are the piece between the cloud itself and that end user or that remote office. If you've got offices in far off lands or, small cities, getting the connectivity to be able to enable that new infrastructure platform is a challenge. And so, for a couple of years, there's been a lot of work done in network virtualization and then network functions virtualization for ways to kind of break the stranglehold that a lot of these old proprietary technologies have had on that problem. And now we're starting to see new approaches to how you do WAN management across those especially long distances. And I think that especially with the growth in capacity demand from things like 5G, from things like Internet of Things, from the many different kinds of mobile devices we now have, it creates a forcing function on IT managers and especially on telcos to say, geez, we can't keep doing it with T1s. We can't wait 90 days to put in a T1 every time we open up a new building. We can't, use the same old hardware because the cost model needs to change. And so there are, quite a few companies, by my count, about a dozen of them that are looking at completely virtualized software ways to break that down, do it flexibly, 9 minutes instead of 90 days, a lot more performance. And so, it's the demand is creating the opportunity, but now you're starting to see innovators adapt and deliver new stuff to solve this problem.
Tom, for the folks watching, I'll share some props for you. You've obviously been an executive in the infrastructure side, but also at HPE prior to your role, and after your role, they did some other things, but at HPE you were doing some mergers and acquisitions with Meg Whitman, so you have a view of looking at the entrepreneurial landscape. So kind of with that kind of focus and also the infrastructure knowledge, what are some of the opportunities that the service providers and these telcos have? Because the network transformation that's happening with 5G and the software can give them a business model opportunity now that they have to seize on. This is the time. It seems like now the acceleration for those guys, and you can also apply it to, say, the enterprises as well, but there are opportunities out there. What are those opportunities for these service providers?
Well, I think if you're in any established business, there's a trade-off between the bird in the hand and something that's disruptive, but I might have to do anyway. And so I think some of these opportunities actually, could potentially degrade profitability in the short term. And that's, I think, where these guys kind of figure out, do I hold on to the old vine or do I swing to the new vine? And it's a tough set of problems. But, I think there is clearly opportunity to go completely software-based, virtualized around how you managed wide area networking traffic. And I think some customers are starting to kind of force the telco providers to do that by saying,
and Andy Grove is the one who coined the term, eat your own before the competition does, but that's the dilemma, the innovative dilemmas that these telcos have and the service providers, that if they don't reinvent the future and hold on to the past,
they'll be
extincted.
Yeah.
They'll be extinct. So that's interesting. So I got to get your take. With that premise, it's pretty obvious what's happening.
Yeah.
Faster networks are happening. You want low latency, faster bandwidth on wireless. That's happening. Yep. What does this mean for the new kind of networks? Because that seems to be a theme coming out of Mobile World Congress on day one. That's going to probably be big tomorrow in the news, is this network transformation, this new kind of network where you have to have fast storage. You got to have low latency data flying around.
Well, yep. I think there are many different parts of it, and you could talk all afternoon about it. But on that one part we were just talking about, and I don't know this company very deeply, but a company like Viptela, right? Viptela is going up against those big T1 sales models and saying, we're going to do it a different way. And it's about speed, it's about performance, about capacity, latency, cost. It's also about flexibility. Like, what if I could kind of totally re-engineer how everything's wired up right now on Tuesday and do it differently on Wednesday? What if I could set up entirely new business models on the fly as opposed to having to plan it months and months in advance? And that, the word agility is overused, but that's what that is. And so I think as you move more and more into software for every one of these functions in the network, it brings with it this benefit of agility. And I think that's under-measured in terms of how people value that. The velocity of being able to change your business is a lot more than what the gear cost, what the depreciation it was, what the pipe cost. And so I think as folks make those moves and they can go faster and do more than their competition, it's a game changer. There's a big discussion about you mentioned the compute layer and the storage layer, the kinds of storage systems you need if you're going to deploy services as a service provider, whether it's a telco or a small VAR that's acting like a service provider. If you're going to compete there, you need stuff that's a lot more flexible, again, a lot more agile than the traditional storage systems. Now, I think the notion of software-defined storage has been around for a while. Figuring out how you make money at that's still a work in progress. But as folks move towards more of a service model for their business, it's not going to look like the traditional
But it sounds like
gear
what
we
you're
have.
saying is the first wave of that is, from a table stakes standpoint, is speed and scale are kind of the first foundational thing that the storage guys have to get going.
Yeah,
on.
I think in storage it's still the same. It has to be cost per megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte. You need to have low latency, high I/O. Those are like the three things. Then the additional things are the services. Is it resilient? Can I replicate? Now we're in a point where I think agility matters more than ever, right? If I can reconfigure everything and build a new service, and I can do it today versus plan for months, that the benefit and the dollars around that are game changing, and the people they're game changing for are the service providers.
So I want to ask you a question from the mind of the average consumer out there, and we all have the relatives ask, hey, what's going on in your tech business? Break it down for us. What, when people say, hey, why can't my phone just go faster? Why can't I have better bandwidth? They might not understand the complexities of what it takes to make all this stuff happen. What's holding back the acceleration in your mind? Is it the technology? Is it the personnel? Is there any kind of area out there that once that straw, breaks the camel's back? What is that straw that breaks the camel's back to accelerate this production of great tech?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm actually one of those grandparents that's asking how come it's not going faster. So I may not have the complete answer, but I'm that frustrated person. I will say that we're in an interesting period of time in terms of how investments get made in new technology. And if you somebody very smart said to me the other day, try to think of the pure innovations that came out of large established companies in the last 10 years. and I've worked for a couple of them, right? But the pure ground up innovations that became big. And you can't come up with a very long list, right? It's been really driven through the venture community. Certainly in Silicon Valley, it's been an engine for decades now, but that's where it comes from. And we've kind of been in a limbo cycle where folks have invested a lot of money in some areas that haven't paid off. So I think we're in a little bit of a gap where there's a lot of money going into obvious spaces. One of those obvious spaces is security. Before that it was all these apps that we use for social, but there hasn't been enough engineering and core hard tech silicon to drive these new apps. There hasn't been enough hard engineering in building entirely new storage platforms and software that scale at service provider levels, because that's going to cost a lot of money. So I think we're starting to see the beginnings of that, but it takes time to play it all out.
Yeah, it's interesting. The whole digital life thing is coming into the transformation. And one of the Ruve Cohen, who was on earlier, said Snapchat IPO is the big story. But if you look at, like, say, Snapchat, what they're doing, they're both a media company and a platform. Look at fake news from the Facebook platform in the previous election. You're seeing these platforms delivering the kind of value that they weren't really intended. The unintended consequences for these platforms is that they become other things too in digital, like a media company when they weren't really trying to be that. And media companies are trying to be platforms. So there seems to be a platform war going on around who is going to control the platforms. And the question that I always ask is, okay, how does this work in a multi-company environment where composability is much more the new development philosophy than owning a stack, owning technology?
Well, I agree with you, and I think that, again, if you look at it from the standpoint of a customer that's going to buy a lot of their services from the cloud and a lot of their services from other service providers, you have to hit the price points and the performance and the reliability. After that, it's how fast can you turn me on, how fast can you change. It's back to that software-based reconfiguration on the fly. If you can then bring to bear the ability to do that with different qualities of service and more automated control of those changes, that's gold, right? But I don't think we have seen that actually implemented yet at scale in ways that people can consume. So again, I think you're seeing a wave of investment by the VC folks in a number of areas. One of them is new kinds of silicon, new kinds of next generation flash technologies and things like that. I think you're seeing, service provider scale storage technologies starting to emerge. You're starting to see fundamental changes in how wide area networks are managed, all in software, right? So I think you play that through the next year or two. The demand from mobile usage, but especially from Internet of Things and its related demand for data, is going to create a new market opportunities. And who will win? I don't know. But there's a lot of smart investors making bets there.
So certainly you see a lot of the old guard out there, and which are transformers, like Intel, for instance, sponsored this program, gave us the ability to do the programming thanks to Intel, and also SAP contributed a little bit. But you got HPE out there, you see IBM, all these guys are out there, these traditional suppliers. What's the one thing that you can point to that in this new era of supplying technology to the new guard of winners, whether they're telcos or providers or enterprises? The game certainly changed with cloud. What's the blind spot for some of these guys, and where should they be looking for M&A activity?
Yeah.
If you're the CEO of a big company and you're like, hey, I got to pivot, I got to fill my product lines, where's the order of operations from a focus standpoint?
Okay, well, you take a couple of those companies, and I'd say that I've both observed and been guilty of some of what's not working now, right? And the instinct, if you're in one of those places, is to say, look, we've got all this technology, we've got servers, storage, networking. What if we just bundle up what we've got and point it at this new set of applications? And I think you can make some ground up there, you can do some stuff, but at the end of the day, the new requirements require new technology. And I think the larger companies haven't been successful at investing in new stuff in their own, like Memristor or some of these new technologies folks have talked about, the machine. They get announced, they come, they go. Why? Because they're expensive, they're really hard.
It takes real
years,
R&D.
Yeah, years of real R&D. And it's difficult, in the economic environment that we're in, to sustain that. So, the reality is, I think there needs to be a lot more aggressive focus on identifying hard technology that can feed the supply chain for some of those solutions. And that's why I think, I'm not an expert.
That's where the startup opportunity is too.
Startup opportunity.
Those guys are going to fill that void because they're doing the R&D.
But the startups that are going to succeed in the future that relate to this problem, they're not the guy building an app That's not where it is. It's technology that's actually hard, you know? That's why I think you see things like NVIDIA. Why is that stock so hot? Well, they developed unique silicon that was applicable to a whole bunch more areas than folks realized, right? Now,
So the difference is, if I hear what you're saying,